The HOA president screamed, "Arrest him!" as I launched my boat on my own damn lake. There I am, waist deep in icy water at 6 a.m., when Margaret Thornfield storms down my dock like she owns the place. Her perfectly manicured finger is inches from my face, shrieking, "Trespasser!" while a bewildered deputy fumbles with his handcuffs. "Ma'am, this is my property," I say, water dripping from my waders. "Not anymore," she screams, spit flying. "I'm having you arrested for illegal boat launching." The metal cuffs click around my wrists as my 12-foot aluminum boat bobs innocently beside us. 15 neighbors have gathered on their decks, phones out, filming this insanity. The smell of morning coffee mixes with lake water and Margaret's overpowering perfume. Here's the kicker: 10 minutes later, I owned her precious Marina. What would you do if they handcuffed you on your own dock? Drop your location and worst HOA horror story below. Let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started. My name's Jake Morrison, and 3 years ago I lost my wife Sarah to cancer. We'd bought this lakefront property 15 years back as our retirement dream. 12 pristine acres with a private lake, complete water rights, and the kind of peace you can't put a price tag on. Sarah and I spent every morning on that dock with our coffee, watching the mist rise off the water. The sound of loons calling, the gentle lap of waves against sun-warmed wood planks, the smell of pine needles and her lavender shampoo mixing in the dawn air. This place was our sanctuary during her final brutal months. After Sarah passed, my daily fishing routine became my lifeline. Me and my German Shepherd Rex would head out at 5 a.m. sharp, and for a few hours the world made sense again. That little aluminum boat wasn't just transportation, it was the difference between surviving and drowning in grief. Enter Margaret Maggie Thornfield, the human equivalent of stepping on a Lego barefoot. 6 months ago, this woman seized the HOA presidency like Napoleon conquering Europe. Picture a razor-sharp 55-year-old who treats her pristine white BMW SUV like a battle tank. Always dressed for a corporate takeover, even at backyard barbecues. The kind of person who'd fine you for breathing too loudly. Maggie had been a city council member before retiring, translation. Got voted out for being insufferable. Within her first week as HOA president, violation notices tripled. Christmas lights still up January 2nd, $200 fine. Dog barking during broad daylight, $150. Garden gnome facing the wrong direction, don't even ask. But I minded my own business, kept my property spotless, paid my dues early, and figured she'd burn herself out terrorizing easier targets. Big mistake. The declaration of war arrived via certified mail on a rainy Tuesday. Official HOA letterhead, Maggie's pretentious flowing signature, and a $500 fine for unauthorized watercraft storage creating visual pollution, inconsistent with community aesthetic standards. I read it 3 times at my kitchen table, Rex snoring at my feet, the coffee turning cold in my cup. According to this document, my boat launch area, the same one that had existed when I bought the property, now violated some mysterious community lakefront uniformity requirement. Here's the kicker. My dock was suddenly common HOA property. The attached justification letter, written on pink stationery that reeked of cheap department store perfume, made my blood pressure spike. Individual boat launches create unsightly infrastructure impacting our community's premium market positioning. Mr. Morrison's facility represents a significant aesthetic liability requiring immediate remediation. Premium market positioning? We're talking about a 12-foot aluminum fishing boat that's older than some of my neighbors' kids. I'd been launching from that exact spot for 15 years. Every single homeowner knew about my morning routine. Half of them had used my ramp when theirs needed repairs. Old Mrs. Victoria next door still waves from her kitchen window every dawn. But Queen Maggie had decided I was public enemy number 1. The hypocrisy burned worst of all. Her own property. A hideous contemporary palace she'd bulldozed the original cottage to build, featured an imported sand beach and concrete seawall that definitely violated every natural lakefront rule she claimed to protect. But my humble wooden dock? That was the community crisis. I called her that evening, foolishly hoping for reason. "Mrs. Thornfield, Jake Morrison from Lakeshore Drive. There's obviously been some mistake about my dock situation." "No mistake whatsoever." Her voice could freeze hell over. "The board unanimously determined that individual watercraft facilities undermine property values. 30 days to remove everything or face escalating penalties." Ma'am, I own the water rights. It's explicitly stated in my property deed. The HOA supersedes individual claims when community welfare is threatened. Don't contact me again about this matter. The line went dead. I sat there holding my phone, staring at Rex's confused expression that perfectly matched my own. The woman had just declared war on a widower's only remaining source of peace. Margaret Thornfield had no clue what she'd awakened. Maggie didn't waste time escalating her little power trip. 3 days after our phone call, I found a notice taped to my front door, not mailed, hand-delivered like some medieval declaration of war. Emergency HOA board meeting, Thursday 7 p.m. Community Center. Mandatory attendance, all waterfront property owners. The smell of her sickeningly sweet perfume still lingered on the paper. Even her stationery was aggressive. Thursday night, I walked into the community center expecting maybe a dozen people. Instead, 40-plus neighbors packed those uncomfortable metal folding chairs. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps, mixing with the scent of burnt coffee and industrial floor cleaner. You could taste the tension in the recycled air. Maggie had positioned herself behind a folding table like it was the Supreme Court bench, wearing a charcoal business suit that probably cost more than my boat. To her right sat her secret weapon, Curtis Thornfield, her lawyer nephew, a pale, nervous-looking guy in his 30s who kept adjusting his tie like it was choking him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maggie began, her voice echoing off the concrete walls, "we're here to address a serious threat to our community's property values and legal standing." A threat? I'm sitting there in my flannel shirt and work boots, wondering if she's talking about some environmental disaster. Mr. Jake Morrison has constructed unauthorized maritime infrastructure that encroaches on common HOA property. She gestured toward me like I was a convicted felon. His dock extends illegally into community waters, creating liability exposure for every homeowner here. Then came the sucker punch that made my stomach drop. Curtis unrolled a survey map across the table, a completely different property survey than what I had in my files. According to their version, my dock extended 15 feet beyond my property line into HOA-controlled common water area. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt 40 pairs of eyes turning toward me, some sympathetic, others confused. The metal chair legs scraped against linoleum as people leaned forward to get a better look. Time for my counterpunch. I stood up slowly, pulling my original property deed and 2009 survey from my jacket pocket. Years ago, my late wife Sarah had insisted I keep all our important documents organized in a fireproof safe, one of her many acts of wisdom that kept saving my ass long after she was gone. "Ma'am, with all due respect," I said, unfolding my documents on her precious table, "I've got paperwork that tells a different story." My survey clearly showed water rights extending 200 feet from my shoreline well beyond my dock's modest 30-foot reach. The deed explicitly included all water rights, mineral rights, and access privileges in perpetuity. I'd learned to always keep original property documents accessible after watching too many neighbors get screwed by HOAs claiming common areas that weren't actually theirs. Curtis leaned over to examine my documents, his face going pale as notebook paper. He whispered something to Maggie that made her jaw clench so tight I thought she might crack a molar. "Surveys can be outdated," she said, but her voice had lost its courtroom confidence. "Property boundaries evolve as communities develop. The HOA has a responsibility to protect common areas from individual appropriation." That's when Mrs. Victoria, my 78-year-old neighbor, stood up in the back row with surprising dignity. "Excuse me, but Jake's been using that dock since before this HOA even existed. My husband and I watched him build it in 2009. We borrowed his boat launch when our grandson visited." A few other longtime residents nodded agreement. Tom Hendricks from across the lake called out, "Hell, Jake let us use his ramp when the county boat launch was closed for repairs last summer." Maggie's perfect composure cracked like ice on warm pavement. Red blotches appeared on her neck above her pearl necklace, spreading upward toward her carefully made-up face. "Personal favors don't establish legal precedent," she snapped, her voice rising an octave. "Mr. Morrison's continued violation creates insurance liability for the entire community. If someone gets injured using his unauthorized facility, we're all potentially liable." Curtis cleared his throat nervously, adjusting his glasses. "The HOA's insurance specifically excludes coverage for individually owned recreational infrastructure that hasn't been properly permitted and inspected." Now she was playing the fear card brilliant. threaten everyone's financial security because of my dangerous fishing dock that had never hurt a soul in 15 years. I've been safely using that dock for 15 years, I said calmly, hands steady despite my rising anger. Never had a single incident. Never had a complaint until 6 months ago. Previous boards were clearly negligent in their oversight duties, Maggie fired back. This board takes its fiduciary responsibilities seriously. The room felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Someone's stomach growled audibly in the silence. Metal chairs squeaked as people shifted uncomfortably. "Here's what's going to happen," Maggie announced, standing to assert dominance. "Mr. Morrison has 30 days to remove his dock and cease unauthorized water access, or face legal action for property encroachment and community endangerment. Legal fees will be assessed to his property account." The meeting ended with awkward silence and the scraping of 40 chairs against linoleum. People filed out, avoiding eye contact, afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. War had been officially declared. Time to prepare my defense. Maggie doubled down on her power trip faster than I expected. The Monday after our community center showdown, I woke up to find a uniformed security guard standing at the edge of my property line, clipboard in hand, staring at my dock like it was about to explode. The smell of fresh diesel exhaust hung in the morning air. His pickup truck was still running in my driveway. Rex started barking from inside the house, that deep warning bark that meant stranger danger. "Morning," I called out, walking down toward the water in my bathrobe and slippers. "You lost?" The guard turned around, and I nearly choked on my coffee. Derek Kowalski, Maggie's unemployed son-in-law who'd been living in her basement for the past year. A soft-looking guy in his late 20s wearing a crisp security uniform that still had creases from the package. "Sir, I'm conducting lakefront patrol for the HOA," Derek announced, trying to sound official while avoiding eye contact. "Your dock has been posted as a violation area requiring daily monitoring." Daily monitoring? I looked past him and saw fresh no trespassing signs hammered into the shoreline around my dock. Bright yellow plastic that screamed construction zone against the natural wood and stone. "Derek, isn't it? Maggie's son-in-law?" I kept my voice friendly despite wanting to toss him in the lake. "When did you become the security guard?" His face flushed red above his collar. "I'm certified," he mumbled, tapping his clipboard. "Mrs. Thornfield hired me to ensure HOA property compliance." The absurdity hit me like a slap. Maggie had literally hired family to harass me on my own property. The woman wasn't just petty, she was creating jobs for relatives using HOA funds. Over the next week, Derek showed up every morning at precisely 6 a.m., parking in the exact spot that blocked my usual path to the water. He'd sit in his truck for an hour, writing God knows what on his clipboard, while I tried to go about my normal routine. But I'm not one to sit around complaining. While Derek played security theater, I spent my afternoons at the county recorder's office, digging through every HOA document I could find. The musty smell of old paper and the sound of ancient copy machines became my daily soundtrack. That's where I hit pay dirt that changed everything. Dolores Martinez, the county clerk who'd been filing HOA paperwork for 30 years, pulled me aside on Wednesday afternoon. "Honey, you might want to look at this," she whispered, sliding a manila folder across the scratched wooden counter. Inside was Maggie's election paperwork from 6 months ago. According to county requirements, HOA elections had to be properly noticed to all homeowners at least 30 days in advance. The notices had to be sent certified mail with return receipts. Maggie's election notice? Sent regular mail to only half the community. No return receipts. No certified delivery. The election that put her in power wasn't even legally valid. "I've seen every trick in the book," Dolores said, adjusting her reading glasses. "This lady cut corners everywhere. Half these documents aren't even properly notarized. I photocopied everything, my hands actually shaking as the machine hummed and flashed." This was bigger than my dock. This was about the entire foundation of Maggie's authority. Meanwhile, Derek's harassment campaign was escalating. He started following me around my own property with that damn clipboard, documenting my dock maintenance activities like I was some kind of environmental criminal. Thursday morning, I caught him measuring the distance between my dock posts and the shoreline. "Find anything interesting?" I asked, walking up behind him. He jumped like I'd fired a starter pistol. Just documenting compliance issues," he stammered, nearly dropping his measuring tape in the water. "You know this is private property, right? The signs you posted are actually on my land, not HOA common area." His face went white. Mrs. Thornfield says a lot of things." doesn't make them legal. But Maggie wasn't just relying on her son-in-law's security theater. She was building a coalition of supporters, mostly newer residents who didn't know the lake's history. She hosted coffee meetings at her house, spreading rumors about my mental state deteriorating after Sarah's death, questioning whether a grieving widower should have unrestricted access to community water resources. The woman was playing psychological warfare, and it was working. Some neighbors who'd been friendly for years started avoiding eye contact when I walked Rex around the block. Friday afternoon brought another certified letter this time, threatening to hire an attorney if I didn't remove my illegal structures within 2 weeks. The letter mentioned escalating enforcement measures and community safety concerns. Sitting at my kitchen table that evening, surrounded by photocopied HOA documents and legal papers, I realized Maggie had made a critical mistake. She was so focused on crushing me that she'd exposed her own illegal power grab. The game was about to change completely. I just needed to figure out how to play the hand I'd been dealt. Maggie's next move caught me completely off guard. The following Tuesday, I was replacing a loose board on my dock when I heard voices carrying across the water. Looking up, I saw her marching down the gravel path to Hendricks Marina with a small entourage: Curtis, the nephew lawyer, Derek with his ever-present clipboard, and 2 people I didn't recognize. The morning air was still crisp, carrying the scent of pine sap and the distant sound of a loon calling. Rex sat on the dock beside me, ears perked up, sensing something was about to go sideways. 20 minutes later, Maggie emerged from the Marina office with a satisfied smirk that made my stomach churn. She was clutching a manila folder against her chest like a winning lottery ticket. I found out what she'd done that afternoon when Tommy Kowalski, the Marina's dockhand and Derek's cousin, stopped by my place looking nervous as a cat in a thunderstorm. "Jake, I probably shouldn't be telling you this," Tommy said, glancing around like he expected Maggie to jump out from behind a tree. "But she just offered Bill Hendricks 50 grand for exclusive boat launch services." My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. "Exclusive how?" "HOA members only. She wants to buy out the Marina's public access and create some kind of private club arrangement." Tommy kicked at the gravel with his work boot. "Bill's actually considering it. 50,000 cash would cover his equipment upgrades and then some." The chess move was brilliant and vicious. If Maggie could control the only other boat access on the lake, she could effectively strand me on my own property. No alternative launch site meant my dock became even more problematic in the eyes of nervous neighbors. But here's where her arrogance tripped her up. Tommy had been eavesdropping on every conversation. "She promised Bill the money would come from the HOA's emergency fund," he continued, lowering his voice. "Said it was a community safety investment to prevent liability issues with uncontrolled water access." My mind started racing. Emergency funds had strict legal requirements. They could only be used for actual emergencies, and spending decisions required board votes with proper notice to all homeowners. Using emergency money for a marina deal would be blatant misappropriation. "Tommy, you hear anything else?" "Yeah, she kept talking about how this would solve the Morrison problem permanently. And get this, she wants Bill to post private property signs all around the marina entrance, blocking off public parking." That evening, I drove over to visit Mrs. Victoria, my elderly neighbor who'd lived here since the lake development began in 1995. Her small house smelled like jasmine tea and old photographs, comforting in the way that only genuinely lived-in homes can be. "Mrs. Victoria, I need to ask you about the early days here. Do you remember how the lake access was originally set up?" Her weathered face brightened immediately. "Oh yes, very clearly. My late husband Tom was on the original planning committee." She shuffled to an old cedar chest and pulled out a photo album thick with memories. "Look here," she said, pointing to a faded color photo from 1995. "This shows the lake during the first summer. See? There were boat launches all along the shoreline, not just yours and the marina." I studied the photo carefully. Sure enough, I could see at least 4 different boat ramps around the lake's perimeter, with families launching everything from canoes to small motorboats. "The original developer promised lake access to all property owners in perpetuity," Mrs. Victoria continued, flipping through more photos. "That's why we bought here. The community was built around shared water recreation." She handed me a newspaper clipping from the local paper's real estate section, dated August 1994. The headline read, "New Lake Community Guarantees Water Access for All Residents." The article quoted the developer extensively about permanent lake privileges and community-centered water recreation. Mrs. Victoria, would you be willing to testify about this if it came to a legal dispute? Her eyes sparkled with determination. That woman is trying to steal what we all paid for 30 years ago. Of course I'll testify. Driving home with photocopies of Mrs. Victoria's documents, I started seeing the bigger picture. Maggie wasn't just targeting my dock, she was systematically taking control of the entire lake access system. The Marina deal would give her leverage over everyone who wanted to use the water, but she'd made a crucial mistake by using emergency funds for a non-emergency purchase. That kind of financial mismanagement could invalidate her entire board authority, especially when combined with her illegal election. Back home, I spread all my evidence across the kitchen table. The invalid election documents, the emergency fund misuse, the original lake access guarantees, and Mrs. Victoria's historical photos. Rex lay at my feet, occasionally looking up as if he knew something big was brewing. The pieces were starting to form a complete picture. Maggie thought she was playing chess, but she'd actually been setting up her own downfall one illegal move at a time. Tomorrow, I'd start putting together the counterattack that would end this nonsense permanently. The next morning, I was back at the county recorder's office before Dolores had even finished her first cup of coffee. The familiar smell of old paper and copying toner had become oddly comforting, like the scent of impending justice. You're becoming a regular, Dolores laughed, unlocking the filing cabinets. What are we hunting for today? The original Lake Development Covenant from 1994. Mrs. Victoria mentioned it, and I need to see the actual legal language. Dolores disappeared into the basement archives, returning 20 minutes later with a thick binder covered in dust. Haven't seen anyone request this in years, she said, setting it down with a satisfying thunk on the wooden counter. I opened the binder, and my heart started pounding before I'd even read the first page. There it was, in black and white legal language that would make Maggie's face go whiter than her BMW. Lake access guaranteed to all original property owners in perpetuity, with full water rights including, but not limited to, boat launching, dock construction, and recreational watercraft operation. But that wasn't the bombshell that made my hands shake. The real game changer was on page 12. Hendricks Marina operates under renewable lease agreement with Lakeshore Development Corporation. Term, 25 years. Expiration, December 31st, 2022. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The Marina's lease had expired 2 years ago and was never renewed. According to the covenant, when Marina leases expired, the property reverted to county control for tax collection pending new ownership determination. Dolores, what happens when businesses operate on expired leases? She adjusted her reading glasses and peered at the document. Technically, they're squatting. Property goes into tax default, and the county can auction it for back taxes owed. My pulse quickened. How much would 2 years of back taxes be on Marina property? Let me check the current assessment. She pulled up the computer records, fingers clicking across the keyboard. Marina property is assessed at $180,000. Annual property tax runs about $6,000. So we're looking at roughly $12,000 in unpaid taxes plus penalties. $12,000. I had more than that in my retirement savings from the electrical work I'd done over 30 years. When would a tax auction happen? County holds them quarterly. Next one is... She flipped through a calendar. This Friday morning at 10 a.m. This Friday, 3 days away. Dolores, has anyone else requested information about the Marina property recently? She scrolled through her computer logs. Nope. You're the first person to pull these files in over 2 years. Most folks don't even know these old covenants exist. I sat there staring at the documents, my brain racing through possibilities. If I could buy the Marina property at the tax auction, I'd control the only commercial boat access on the lake. Maggie's plan to create an exclusive HOA Marina would crumble instantly. But more importantly, owning the Marina would give me leverage to force a resolution to this entire mess. She couldn't threaten my dock if I controlled the alternative access point. Dolores, one more question. If someone wanted to bid at Friday's auction, what would they need? Certified check for the full amount, valid ID, and show up ready to bid. It's first come, first served if there's only one bidder. Multiple bidders, it goes to highest offer. I thanked Dolores and walked to my truck in a daze. The morning sun felt warmer, the air smelled cleaner, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was holding the winning hand instead of just trying not to lose. Maggie thought she was cornering me with her Marina scheme. Instead, She'd led me straight to the solution that would end her reign of terror permanently. Time to liquidate some retirement funds and become an accidental Marina owner. I spent the rest of Wednesday afternoon assembling my war council, starting with a phone call to Helen Vasquez, a retirement community lawyer who'd earned a reputation for dismantling abusive HOA boards across 3 counties. Jake Morrison? The dock situation Mrs. Victoria called me about? Helen's voice carried the warm authority of someone who'd spent 40 years fighting bureaucratic bullies. I've been waiting for your call. That Thornfield woman sounds like a real piece of work. We met Thursday morning at her office, a converted Victorian house that smelled like old law books and fresh coffee. Helen was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, wearing a navy suit that meant business. "Show me everything," she said, spreading my documents across her mahogany desk. I laid out the whole story: Maggie's invalid election, the misuse of emergency funds for the Marina deal, the original lake covenant guaranteeing perpetual access, and my discovery about the expired Marina lease. Helen studied each document with the focused intensity of a surgeon, occasionally making notes in the margins with a fountain pen that probably cost more than my boat. "This is beautiful," she finally said, looking up with a predatory smile. "Thornfield has violated so many regulations I could spend a week just listing them all. But your Marina acquisition plan? That's pure genius." Next stop, First National Bank, where I'd been banking for 20 years. Robert Kim, the bank president, was a soft-spoken Korean American who'd seen every type of financial scheme imaginable. "Jake, you want to liquidate $30,000 from your retirement account to buy a Marina at a tax auction?" Robert leaned back in his leather chair, studying me over his reading glasses. "That's not exactly a typical Thursday afternoon request." I explained the situation, watching his expression shift from concerned to amused to downright impressed. "So you're essentially buying the Marina to stop the HOA from controlling lake access?" He laughed, shaking his head. "I've seen this scam before. HOA boards trying to monopolize community resources for their own benefit. Usually involves golf courses or swimming pools." Robert expedited the paperwork to have a certified check ready by Friday morning. "You know what? I hope you win that auction. Someone needs to teach these petty tyrants a lesson." My third ally was completely unexpected. Patricia Wells, the county commissioner, called me Thursday evening after Dolores mentioned my research into the Marina situation. "Mr. Morrison, I understand you're interested in the Hendricks Marina tax auction," Patricia said. Her voice carried the practical efficiency of someone who dealt with property disputes daily. "The county has been trying to resolve this situation for 2 years. The previous owner died, his estate never probated properly, and the current operator has been essentially squatting." She explained that Bill Hendricks, the Marina operator, had assumed the lease transferred with his employment, not realizing it had expired. The county wanted this property back on the tax rolls with a legitimate owner. "If you're serious about bidding, you should know there's been no other interest. $12,000 should easily win the auction." My final piece of support came from an unexpected source. My neighbor coalition had grown to 8 households who remembered the original lake access arrangements. Tom Hendricks from across the lake had become the unofficial spokesman for what we jokingly called the Original Owners Alliance. "Jake, we've been talking," Tom said when the group gathered at my house Thursday night. "This isn't just about your dock anymore. Maggie's trying to rewrite the rules for the entire lake community." Mrs. Victoria had brought homemade cookies and old photo albums. The Kowalski family from Pine Street contributed copies of their original property deeds. Even quiet Bob Martinez from the corner lot showed up with his 1995 purchase agreement that explicitly mentioned guaranteed lake access. We mapped out a coordinated strategy. While I handled the Marina acquisition, Helen would file legal motions challenging Maggie's board authority. The neighbors would document any further harassment or intimidation tactics. "Here's what most people don't understand about property tax auctions," Helen explained, spreading legal documents across my kitchen table. "When you successfully bid, you don't just get the property, you get clear title, free of any previous encumbrances or claims. It's like wiping the slate clean." She continued explaining the legal implications. "If you own the Marina, you control commercial access to the lake. Maggie's exclusive HOA deal becomes impossible because she'd need your permission to restrict public use." The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. Instead of fighting Maggie's power grab head-on, We were removing her ability to control the situation entirely. Friday morning, I'd show up at the county courthouse with a certified check and walk away owning the very asset Maggie thought would give her leverage over me. The irony was perfect. Her scheme to corner me had led me straight to the solution that would corner her instead. Rex seemed to sense the excitement, following me around the house with his tail wagging as I prepared for tomorrow's auction. Even my dog knew we were about to turn the tables completely. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes you believe anything is possible. I was sipping coffee on my dock at sunrise, watching the mist rise off the water, when my phone buzzed with a text from Tommy at the Marina. Maggie's been calling Bill all morning. Something's got her panicked. The tax auction wasn't until 10 a.m., but apparently word had leaked that someone was interested in the Marina property. I could practically smell Maggie's desperation through the morning fog. By 8 a.m., I was dressed in my best flannel shirt and heading to the courthouse when Derek's security truck pulled up behind me at the stop sign near my driveway. He followed me for 3 blocks before turning off, clipboard visible on his dashboard like some kind of official surveillance badge. The county courthouse buzzed with its usual Friday morning energy clerks shuffling papers, lawyers in expensive suits hurrying between offices, the smell of burnt coffee mixing with floor wax. I found the auction room on the 2nd floor, a small space with maybe 20 folding chairs facing a podium. At exactly 10 a.m., Commissioner Patricia Wells stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for the quarterly property tax auction. First item, Hendricks Marina property, Lot 47B, assessed value $180,000, back taxes owed $12,347 including penalties. I looked around the room. 3 other people sat scattered among the chairs, an elderly man reading a newspaper, a woman with a real estate folder, and a guy in coveralls who looked like he was just waiting for something else. Do we have any bidders for the opening amount of $12,347? I raised my hand. Yes, ma'am. Any other bidders? Silence. The elderly man kept reading his paper. The woman was checking her phone. Going once, going twice, sold to Mr. Morrison for $12,347. Just like that, I owned a marina. The whole process took less than 5 minutes. But Maggie's panic response was just getting started. I was signing paperwork in the clerk's office when my phone rang. Helen Vasquez, my lawyer, sounded both amused and appalled. Jake, you're not going to believe this. Maggie just called my office trying to hire me to file an emergency injunction blocking the marina sale. She what? Apparently she found out about the auction 20 minutes too late. Now she's claiming the sale was procedurally invalid and demanding it be reversed. I told her I already represent you, which made her start screaming about conflicts of interest and community conspiracies. The woman was completely unhinged. By noon, Derek had escalated from passive surveillance to active harassment. He showed up at the marina while I was meeting with Bill Hendricks to discuss the transition, clipboard in hand like some kind of federal inspector. Sir, this property transfer violates HOA community standards, Derek announced, clearly reading from a script Maggie had written. The HOA board is prepared to file legal challenges to protect community interests. Bill Hendricks, a weathered guy in his 50s who'd been running the marina for 15 years, looked at Derek like he'd grown a second head. Son, this man just bought this place fair and square from the county. Your HOA doesn't have authority over county property sales. But Derek wasn't done with his performance. Mr. Morrison is engaged in a pattern of community disruption designed to undermine legitimate HOA governance. This marina acquisition represents escalation of anti-community behavior. I had to admire the kid's commitment to his mother-in-law's delusions, even if his delivery sounded like he was reading a technical manual. Derek, why don't you go tell Maggie that her exclusive marina deal just became impossible, I said calmly. She can't buy lake access rights from someone who doesn't own them anymore. His face went red above his security uniform collar. He scribbled something on his clipboard and stalked back to his truck, gravel crunching under his boots like an angry teenager. That afternoon brought the real fireworks. Maggie herself showed up at the marina, Curtis, the lawyer nephew, in tow, wearing a red blazer that clashed with her furious expression. The sound of her high heels clicking on the wooden dock announced her arrival like a warning bell. Mr. Morrison, she called out, marching toward where I was reviewing inventory lists with Bill. This fraudulent property acquisition will not stand. Curtis looked embarrassed, trailing behind her like a reluctant dog on a leash. Aunt Maggie, maybe we should discuss this privately. There's nothing private about community theft, she snapped. This man has orchestrated an illegal scheme to circumvent legitimate HOA authority. The afternoon sun caught the highlights in her perfectly styled hair as she jabbed her finger toward my chest. You think buying this marina gives you power over the lake? I'll have this sale overturned before the end of the week, I smiled, enjoying the moment. Good luck with that, Maggie. The county's pretty happy to have this property back on the tax rolls. Her face went from red to purple. The meltdown was just beginning. Saturday morning brought Maggie's most desperate gambit yet. I was replacing a rotted plank on the marina dock when she appeared at the end of the pier, this time alone, wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, her version of casual that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Jake, can we talk? Her voice had shed its usual commanding tone, replaced by something that almost sounded like humility. Almost. I kept hammering, the sound echoing across the still water. Sure, Maggie. What's on your mind? She walked closer, and I caught a whiff of her expensive perfume mixing with the morning scent of lake water and pine needles. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can find a compromise that works for everyone. I set down my hammer and turned to face her. I'm listening. What if we drop all the dock violations? You keep your boat launch, use it however you want, and we'll revise the HOA bylaws to specifically protect your access rights. She paused, studying my expression. In exchange, you agree to a reasonable schedule for marina use, maybe alternating days for HOA members and general public. The offer was reasonable on the surface, but I'd learned not to trust anything this woman proposed. And the emergency fund money you promised Bill Hendricks? Her face twitched slightly. That was a misunderstanding. The board voted to explore marina partnerships, but no funds have been committed. Bullshit. Tommy had overheard her promising $50,000 in cash, but I played along. Seems fair, I said. Let me think about it over the weekend. What I didn't know was that Maggie was recording our entire conversation on her phone, hidden in her purse. Her plan was to edit the recording to make it sound like I was admitting to some kind of extortion scheme using my marina ownership to force HOA concessions. I found out about the recording Monday morning when Curtis called Helen's office, according to what Helen told me later. Apparently he was uncomfortable with his aunt's tactics and wanted to warn someone that she was going too far. But Maggie's recording plan backfired spectacularly. When she played the edited version for the HOA board that Tuesday evening, Mrs. Victoria was there as an observer and immediately recognized the doctored audio. The cuts were obvious, words spliced together that didn't match the natural rhythm of conversation. Margaret, this recording has been altered, Mrs. Victoria announced during the public comment period. I've heard Jake speak for 15 years, and this isn't how he talks. Maggie's face went white. Mrs. Victoria, you're not qualified to analyze audio evidence. I taught high school English for 35 years. I know editing when I hear it. Meanwhile, Maggie was working other angles. She'd created fake social media accounts, Lake Community Watch, and Concerned Homeowner 47 posting in neighborhood Facebook groups about my suspicious behavior and declining mental health since becoming a widower. The posts were carefully crafted to sound concerned rather than malicious. Has anyone else noticed Jake Morrison acting strangely lately? I'm worried about his isolation and the stress of losing his wife. Maybe someone should check on him? Another post read, Jake's been making aggressive moves against the HOA. Given his recent losses, I wonder if grief is affecting his judgment. Should we be concerned about safety around the lake? The poisonous suggestions spread through the online community like digital cancer. Some newer residents who didn't know me personally started viewing me with suspicion. I noticed conversations stopping when I walked into the hardware store, sideways glances at the grocery checkout. But Maggie had underestimated the loyalty of neighbors who'd known me for years. Tom Hendricks figured out the fake accounts were all created on the same day and traced the IP address back to Maggie's home network. Modern technology makes it surprisingly hard to hide digital footprints. Wednesday brought her most brazen attempt yet. Derek showed up at the marina with a clipboard and what appeared to be official county inspection forms, announcing that he was conducting a safety compliance review of the new ownership transition. Sir, I need to inspect all dock structures, boat storage areas, and fuel handling procedures, he declared, trying to sound official while clearly having no idea what he was talking about. Derek, you're not a county inspector. I said calmly. "You're HOA security hired by your mother-in-law. I have authority to ensure community safety standards." "No, you don't. You're trespassing on private property." His confidence cracked immediately. The kid wasn't cut out for intimidation tactics. "Mrs. Thornfield said I should document any safety violations. Mrs. Thornfield doesn't have authority over county property transfers or marina operations. If she wants an inspection, she can request one through proper channels." Derek retreated to his truck, probably to call Maggie for new instructions. I almost felt sorry for him, caught between family loyalty and common sense. But I was done playing defense. Time to go on the offensive and end this charade permanently. The final confrontation was coming, and Maggie had given me all the ammunition I needed. Thursday evening, Maggie called an emergency community meeting with all the theatrical flair of a courtroom drama. The notice, hand-delivered to every house, read, "Urgent, community safety crisis requiring immediate action." She'd even managed to get it printed on official-looking letterhead with red borders. I arrived at the community center 15 minutes early to find the parking lot already half full. Word had spread beyond our immediate neighborhood. I spotted cars from adjacent communities and even recognized Sarah Martinez from the local newspaper, notebook and camera in hand. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like agitated insects, mixing their harsh glare with the smell of industrial coffee and that distinctive community center aroma of cleaning supplies and old carpet. Maggie had arranged the room like a tribunal, with herself positioned behind a folding table at the front, flanked by Curtis and 2 HOA board members I barely knew. More than 60 people packed into folding chairs designed for maybe 40. The tension was thick enough to cut with a boat propeller. Maggie stood as the room settled, wearing a navy blue power suit that screamed, "I'm in charge here." Her voice carried clearly across the crowded space as she launched into her prepared presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight because our community faces an unprecedented threat to safety, property values, and our very way of life." She gestured dramatically toward where I sat in the third row, calm as a lake at dawn. "Mr. Jake Morrison has engaged in a systematic campaign to undermine legitimate community governance through intimidation, property manipulation, and what can only be described as extortion." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors nodded along, others looked skeptical. I spotted Mrs. Victoria in the front row, Tom Hendricks near the back, and my other allies scattered throughout the audience. "His illegal acquisition of Marina property represents a direct attack on our community's ability to manage shared resources," Maggie continued, her voice rising with manufactured indignation. "He's holding our lake access hostage to force HOA compliance with his personal demands." Curtis looked increasingly uncomfortable, shifting papers around his table like he was shuffling a deck of cards. The kid knew this was about to go sideways. "Furthermore," Maggie announced, producing her edited recording, "I have evidence of Mr. Morrison's explicit threats against community welfare." She played the doctored audio, badly edited snippets of our Marina conversation rearranged to make me sound threatening. The cuts were so obvious that several people in the audience exchanged glances. Time for my entrance. I stood slowly, pulling a manila folder from my jacket. The room went completely silent. You could hear the wall clock ticking, someone's stomach growling, the distant hum of the heating system. "Maggie, that's an interesting story," I said, walking calmly to the front of the room. "But I've got some documents that tell a different version." I placed the original 1994 Lake Covenant on her table with a satisfying slap of paper against wood. "This shows that Lake's access belongs to all original property owners in perpetuity. Your HOA never had authority over water rights." Her confident expression began to crack like ice under pressure. "And this," I continued, laying down the election documentation, "proves your election as HOA president was never legally valid. You didn't follow proper notice requirements." Curtis leaned over to examine the papers, his face going pale as winter snow. He whispered something to Maggie that made her jaw clench visibly. "But here's my favorite part," I said, spreading out the emergency fund documentation Helen had prepared. "You promised Bill Hendricks $50,000 from HOA emergency funds money that can only be used for actual emergencies, not personal Marina deals." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Several board members looked genuinely shocked. That's not," Maggie stammered, her composure completely shattered. "Oh, and about that recording?" I pulled out my phone and hit play. The full, unedited conversation filled the room, making her doctored version sound like amateur hour. Turns out I was recording too. Sarah Martinez from the newspaper was frantically scribbling notes, her camera clicking quietly as she documented Maggie's meltdown. That's when Commissioner Patricia Wells entered through the back door, accompanied by a county sheriff's deputy. The sound of official footsteps on linoleum cut through the crowd noise like a knife. "Ms. Thornfield," Patricia announced, her voice carrying the authority of elected office, "we need to discuss your interference with county property auctions and misuse of association funds." The deputy stepped forward with legal papers. "Ma'am, you're being served with a cease and desist order regarding harassment of county property owners." Maggie's face cycled through several shades of red and white as the room watched her authority evaporate in real time. Curtis quietly gathered his papers and headed for the exit, clearly done with his aunt's legal disasters. "This is a conspiracy," Maggie finally exploded, pointing wildly around the room. "He's manipulated all of you into supporting his illegal behavior." But the audience had turned completely. Even her previous supporters were shaking their heads, embarrassed by the spectacle. The queen of the HOA had been dethroned by her own arrogance. The aftermath of Maggie's public meltdown moved faster than a base hitting a lure. By Monday morning, she'd submitted her resignation via a bitter email blaming community conspiracies for her decision to step away from volunteer service. The taste of victory was sweeter than Sarah's homemade apple pie. Derek quietly found employment 2 towns over, probably relieved to escape his mother-in-law's schemes. Curtis returned to boring contract law, grateful to avoid family drama. The whole Thornfield empire crumbled like a house of cards in a windstorm. The Marina transformation exceeded my wildest dreams. Bill Hendricks practically glowed when I offered him a profit-sharing deal instead of just wages. 30 years in this business, and this is the first time an owner actually cared about the people doing the work, he said, showing me equipment that desperately needed upgrading. Tommy's promotion to assistant manager came with the biggest grin I'd seen since my nephew caught his first fish. "I survived the greatest soap opera on the lake," he laughed, "and all I got was this awesome job and front row seats to justice being served." Within 2 weeks, I'd restored free Marina access to all original homeowners, just like the 1994 covenant promised. The morning air filled with sounds I'd missed. Children's laughter echoing across water, boat motors purring to life, the satisfying splash of fishing lines hitting their target. The lake breathed again. Property values jumped 15% over 6 months thanks to restored access and improved facilities. Even the real estate agent was amazed. Lake access is our biggest selling point now. Families are moving here specifically for the Community Marina program, but my proudest achievement honors Sarah's memory in ways that still bring tears to my eyes. The Sarah Morrison Memorial Fishing Program transforms our marina every Saturday morning into a wonderland of childhood discovery. 25 kids arrive at dawn, ranging from shy 6-year-olds to confident teenagers, all eager to learn everything from worm threading to boat safety. The scent of sunscreen mixes with fresh lake air, while young voices create a symphony of questions. Why do fish bite better in the morning? Can I name my fish before I catch it? Will Rex teach me to swim too? Rex has become the world's most patient fishing instructor, allowing tiny hands to pet his fur while parents snap photos of their children's first successful casts. There's pure magic in watching a nervous 10-year-old catch their first bluegill, their face exploding with joy that makes every adult remember why childhood wonder matters. We provide everything: free rods, tackle, instruction, even a fish cleaning station where kids learn the full responsibility of taking a life for food. The County Conservation Department partners with us, teaching ecology and wildlife protection alongside basic angling skills. Mrs. Victoria volunteers as our lake historian, sharing stories about the water's past while children wait patiently for fish to bite. Her gentle voice carries across morning stillness, weaving respect for nature into childhood memories that will last forever. The community healing spread like ripples from a dropped stone. Our new HOA board, properly elected this time, cut violation notices by 70% and established transparent budgeting that prevents future fund abuse. Neighbors actually talk to each other again instead of hiding behind curtains. Helen Vasquez now gets referrals from communities across 3 states. Your story proves that one person with proper documentation can defeat an entire corrupt system, she told me. You've inspired dozens of homeowners to fight back against HOA bullies. Summer evenings bring families for fishing competitions, safety classes, and impromptu barbecues on our expanded dock. Conversation and laughter have replaced the tension that once suffocated our lake community like morning fog. I still take Rex out for sunrise fishing, but now we're joined by neighbors who've rediscovered early morning peace. The water reflects not just clouds and sky, but a community that chose cooperation over conflict. Sometimes I talk to Sarah while casting my line, telling her about kids who've learned to fish or neighbors who've become genuine friends. I know she's proud of how something beautiful grew from ugly conflict. The Marina even earned recognition from the county tourism board. But real success isn't publicity, it's children learning, families connecting, and a community that defeated petty tyranny through solidarity. Your turn. Drop a comment about your worst HOA nightmare below. Let's support each other in fighting these petty dictators. Hit that subscribe button on HOA Stories for more tales of ordinary people beating corrupt systems through persistence, preparation, and community power. Justice tastes better when it's shared.